They called her the Janitor. 15 years of sweeping floors, scrubbing coffee stains, and smiling through whispers that cut deeper than bleach burns. No one ever looked her in the eye. No one ever asked her name. But behind that quiet stare was a secret, one that could bring the whole company to its knees. The same people who dismissed her, who joked behind her back, were about to learn that the woman they overlooked owned everything they stood on. And when she finally spoke, silence would fall like a hammer. They thought she was just cleaning floors, but she was cleaning house. Every morning before dawn, Denise walked through the double doors of Cresswell Holdings with her head held just low enough to go unnoticed. The hum of vending machines and the echo of her cart wheels were her only company. She'd learned every creak in those marble floors, every flicker in the hallway lights. To them, she was just Miss Denise, the woman who made their offices shine before they arrived to make their deals. They never saw the exhaustion behind her steady rhythm, or the quiet pride she took in work no one thanked her for. But what they saw least of all was her power. Behind that faded uniform and worn sneakers was a woman who once built something great, a company she helped create before it was taken from her by greed and deceit. For 15 years, she stayed silent, pushing her cart past the same people who lived off her stolen dream. She listened as they mocked, as they bragged, as they spoke of diversity in the same breath they dismissed her presence. Denise wasn't angry, not anymore. Anger fades. What was left was patience, precision, a plan that had been mopping its way down those hallways one night at a time. She knew the right moment would come, and when it did, she wouldn't raise her voice. She wouldn't need to. She thought she'd seen it all. But one careless act was about to reveal just how deep the rot ran, and give her the reason she'd been waiting for all along. Denise had long learned that the cruelest things weren't shouted. They were whispered. It started small, like it always does. A glance too long, a joke tossed across the break room that ended in nervous laughter when she walked in, the subtle ways people made her invisible while pretending they didn't. But racism in that building didn't come wearing slurs or threats. It wore suits and smiles. It hid behind policy, protocol, and company culture. She watched it unfold daily. The warehouse workers, mostly black, brown, or aging, getting written up for being a few minutes late, while managers strolled in half an hour past start time, without consequence. She saw the same men who would meet her eyes hold long conversations with interns who looked just like them, patting their backs, calling them future leaders. Once, she overheard a supervisor say, "She's been here forever. Guess she's comfortable where she is." Like staying invisible was her ambition. Every insult rolled off her like water, but every word stuck somewhere deeper, layering into something heavier. She kept cleaning, nodding, smiling, all while her notebook grew thicker. It wasn't just about dirty floors anymore. It was about truth, dates, names, faces, and decisions that showed exactly who they were. Then came Thomas Wexler, new CO, young, polished, full of buzzwords. He walked into Cresswell like he owned it and treated everyone else like they didn't belong. Denise knew the type. Men who'd never built a thing but took credit for what others bled for. He never said anything outright, but the tone said enough. When he passed her, he'd move his briefcase to the opposite hand, as if she might smudge it. He'd drop his coffee cup on her cart without a word, or worse, with a smile that said, "You should be grateful I noticed you at all." One afternoon, during a company luncheon, Denise slipped in to clean early. The executives were still there, glasses clinking, laughter bouncing off glass walls. She froze when she heard Wexler's voice. "I swear, some of these hires are just for optics. It's not charity, we gotta look inclusive." Laughter followed, the kind that told her no one disagreed. She stood still behind the catering cart, her hand gripping the mop handle so tight her knuckles whitened. She didn't speak. She just listened, like she had for 15 years. Every word another nail in the coffin of their illusion. Weeks later, it got worse. Cynthia, one of the night janitors, came in late. Her son had been in an accident. She begged for a few hours off. The HR rep told her to clock out if she couldn't commit to her shift. Denise found her crying in the supply room, face buried in her hands. That was when something inside Denise shifted. She'd been patient, strategic, But watching Cynthia sob in that fluorescent light made the years of silence burn like acid. That same week, Wexler hosted a team appreciation event. He stood at the podium, smiling for photos, talking about unity and equal opportunity. Denise watched from the back, holding a tray of water bottles, her uniform pressed, her back straight. When he thanked the hard-working support staff who keep this place running, no one clapped. They just turned to look at her. It was a kind of look that wasn't gratitude. It was condescension dressed as kindness. Later that night, she found herself standing in the empty hallway outside the executive suite. The office was dark except for the glow under Wexler's door. She could hear laughter again, but this time there was no party, just him and two others. She couldn't make out every word, but one line cut clear through the wall. If they don't like how I run this place, they can go back to where they came from. The laughter that followed wasn't just cruel, it was careless. They thought no one was listening. Denise felt something she hadn't in years, not anger, but certainty. She went to her locker, pulled out her notebook, and flipped to the last page. "Enough," she whispered, the word like a promise. That night, she called Elliot her lawyer, the one man who knew the truth. She told him she was ready to end 15 years of silence, ready to remind them who she really was. When she hung up, she didn't go home. She went to the records room, her hands steady, her heart calm. She scanned documents, copied files, and watched the company's secrets print out in black and white. Every number, every lie, every crooked signature. They'd all see it soon. But power doesn't shift quietly. And before Denise could bring her truth to light, one final humiliation was waiting, one that would turn her patience into fire. She thought she'd faced the worst of them, but what happened next would test everything she believed about justice and herself. The morning of the shareholders' meeting began like any other, until Denise walked in wearing a navy blazer instead of her uniform. The security guard blinked, unsure whether to stop her or step aside. She didn't slow down. Inside the glass-walled boardroom, the executives were already gathered, Wexler at the head of the table, laughing, confident, oblivious. When the door opened and Denise stepped in, the laughter died mid-breath. For a moment, no one spoke. Wexler smirked, assuming she'd lost her way. But then Elliot entered behind her, briefcase in hand, eyes cold with purpose. He laid out a folder thick with documents, ownership papers, bank transfers, founding agreements, proof that Denise Jenkins was not an employee, but the rightful majority owner of Cresswell Holdings. The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. Wexler stammered, reaching for words that wouldn't come. Denise didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked around the table at the men and women who had laughed at her for years and said, "You're done." One by one, faces turned pale as lawyers read aloud the terms she'd set in motion. Terminations, audits, federal filings already delivered that morning. Wexler tried to protest, standing up, calling it a mistake, but Denise's voice cut through him like glass. The mistake was thinking I was beneath you. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. For 15 years, she had cleaned their floors, erased their messes, and now she was wiping their names off the company she built. Cameras from internal security caught every second. The look of disbelief, the shame that followed. When she turned to leave, she paused by the door, eyes steady on Wexler. "This building was built on my work, my husband's dream, and my name," she said quietly. "It's time you remembered that." Then she walked out, the sound of her heels echoing where her mop once did. But as the elevator doors closed, she didn't smile. The victory didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. Still, deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. Because power changes hands, but prejudice doesn't disappear overnight. And soon, she'd find out what happens when those she exposed decided they weren't going down quietly. In the days that followed, the building felt different. Quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves were processing what had happened. Denise didn't return to the janitor's closet. She didn't need to. Her name was back on the company papers, her ownership restored, her husband's legacy finally acknowledged. But victory didn't erase the years she spent unseen. It didn't change the way people looked at her in the elevator. unsure whether to apologize or pretend nothing had happened. Some resigned, some whispered, others posted hollow messages about new beginnings on LinkedIn. Denise just kept moving forward, not for revenge, but for peace. She raised wages, reinstated benefits, and quietly funded scholarships for the children of custodial and warehouse workers, the ones who'd been told they didn't belong. Yet even as she rebuilt, she knew her story wasn't an isolated one. How many others were mopping floors in buildings they helped build? How many were dismissed, doubted, or devalued because of the color of their skin? Denise's triumph was more than personal. It was proof that silence isn't weakness, that dignity has its own kind of power, and that racism doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers through policies, promotions, and polite smiles. Standing in the boardroom one last time, she looked out over the city skyline and thought about every person who'd ever been told they were less. "They'll remember me now," she whispered, not out of pride, but out of purpose. Because the fight wasn't just about one woman reclaiming her company. It was about a truth too many still try to overlook. That the world changes only when the people who've been ignored the longest finally stand where they've always belonged. So ask yourself, how many more Denises will it take before we stop mistaking humility for weakness and start seeing strength in the ones we overlook every day?